Well, the good news is I just paid off my credit card, but it got me to thinking about my family's debt and our national debt. Now, Justin Trudeau and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland like to tell Canadians that everything is rosy and the economy is going to come roaring back. But I wonder if those are just nice words, and now with the Russia-Ukraine situation, how bad could it really be? So I did some research and I thought I'd share some information that can help you put things into perspective and maybe help your family. So hang with me while we swallow the red pill and we figure out how we can prepare. I'm about to share some uncomfortable truths, but I promise you, you won't need an economics degree to understand it. We'll keep it simple and common sense. So I will say this though. This is a wake-up call and a warning to all of us because I'm really starting to believe that there's a whole world of economic hurt about to hit us like a tsunami. But I promise at the end of this, I'll tell you the 5 things I'm going to do to prepare for it. Okay, so we're reopening our economy, and after 2 years, we know that's not going to be easy. We know that inflation is soaring and interest rates are rising, and we know that there's likely several more interest rates hikes on the horizon. The thing is, Canadian families and businesses are more in debt than ever, and the Bank of Canada has been warning Canadians have too much debt, and with interest rates rising and a real estate market that is cooling off, this could leave Canadians with a mortgage well above their house value. So let's compare personal debt to national debt. According to Statistics Canada, at the end of 2020, Canadians had on average $23,035 in non-mortgage debt. At the end of 2021, Canadians owed $1.77 in debt for every dollar that they earn. And that was projected to reach $1.84 in debt for every dollar they earn. So to put that in perspective, for the previous 30 years before 2021, Canadian household debt-to-income ratios averaged about 129.9%. Today, it's 177% debt-to-income ratio. And the average creditor looks for only 42%. So the bad news is that our national debt is equally unsustainable. As of the end of 2020, our debt was 117% of Canada's economic output, or GDP. So, for starters, the government forecast, which are adjusted for inflation, show economic growth is actually in a continuous decline from 4% projected for 2022 to 1.8% in 2025. And that's far from growing or roaring back. So it's like what would happen if your family takes a pay cut while all your expenses and your interest charges and your minimum payments are growing. As the inflation rate continues making everything more expensive, world economists also expect that Canada will have the 8th highest unemployment rate. So you're saying, well, things have got to get better because we're reopening, right? And everything's going to get back to normal. Well, according to the OECD, which ranks economic development all over the world, Canada will be the worst performing advanced economy through till 2030. Now, adjusting for inflation, the growth is actually 0.7% per year over this entire decade. The uncomfortable truth is that the government's own data shows that Canada's economy has been underperforming for over a decade. A chief analyst at Statistics Canada found that the economic growth is lower over the past 10 years than any other decade since the Great Depression in the 1930s. So Canada literally ranks near the bottom of the list at 30 out of 38 countries on average economic growth between 2015 and 2019. So that's like saying your cost of living went up since Justin Trudeau was elected in 2015, but your income didn't, so you're worse off than you were 10 years ago. Now, most Canadians would say, well, you know what, we just went through a pandemic and we had all this big spending, so it kind of makes sense, right? While the Trudeau government has been trying to spend its way out of a pandemic, the uncomfortable truth is that the government already had overspent $160 billion prior to the pandemic. And now it's probably going to have to go on another spending spree to try and get Canadians back to work and, of course, to buy votes at the next election. So does that make any sense? I mean, any family who lost wages and borrowed their way through the last 2 years knows that going on a spending spree and racking up more high-interest debt is a recipe for disaster. So you're saying, well, if Canada can start investing in growth, things have got to start looking up, right? That's a very optimistic point of view. But the world analysts are noting that the growth rate of investment in Canada actually dropped from 44.8% in 2005 to only 11% in 2019, and that was pre-COVID. So this literally means that since 2015, when Justin Trudeau was elected, from then until 2019, which is pre-pandemic, we've experienced the slowest growth in business investment in the last 50 years. And that's entirely due to this government's implementing government policies, increasing regulation, red tape. They literally stopped business investment with higher taxes and a massive new carbon tax, which is already crippling many industries, including farmers. So these policies have literally sent a chill to freeze investments out of Canada. Now, Justin and Chrystia claim that these new ways of growing Canada would have zero impact on the economy and that they would create new economies. But that's not the reality either. And studies are showing that just the carbon tax alone will lead to 185,000 more jobs lost and a loss of $38 billion in GDP. Now you might say, well, Canada's investing in new directions, so it'll eventually pay off, right? But that depends on whether you're over-mortgaging an eco-friendly luxury dream house that's going to keep you house poor for generations. The national debt has almost reached $1.5 trillion, and it's expected to set another new record when it reaches $2 trillion before 2025. That's only 3 years from now. Today, your share of the national debt is $32,120. Now, you have to understand that the government doesn't make any money. You do. And we pay taxes. So economists are now warning that Canadians that are currently between the ages of 16 and 25, they can expect to pay an additional $20,000 each in personal income taxes over their lifetime to pay for just the interest accumulated on our federal debt in the last couple of years. That's an extra $20,000 per person on top of the increase in taxes that the government is going to have to implement just to balance the budget. And it won't even touch the $2 trillion in debt. It's kind of like, when you pay the minimum payments on your credit cards. So for the last few years, Justin told us that budgets will balance themselves, and Finance Minister told us that Canada can afford to spend because, our debt to GDP is comparable to other countries. But again, the uncomfortable truth is that our debt is surpassing levels anyone ever thought it could. Canada has the 5th worst debt to GDP ratio out of 29 advanced countries. Our gross domestic product, or our production as a nation, is actually declining. We've killed our resource sector, we've slaughtered the oil and gas cash cows, we've permanently closed 40 to 50% of our small businesses, which were half of the economy in the first place. And now if you factor in inflation and geopolitical instability in Russia and the Ukraine, this is causing rampant gas prices, and that's going to cripple the restart of our economy post-pandemic. So think of it this way. You worked hard, you do well in life, you save money so that you can help your kids get an education and get a good start in life. And then you leave the rest of your estate to help your grandchildren be better off. But if normal Canadians can't handle their own personal debt and rising taxes, how can our grandchildren handle the mounting national debt left by the Trudeau spending? Do I have a solution for all of this? No, I'm not sure anyone does. But to be honest, I am questioning what to do with my money and my investments. Personally, I have no doubt that we're headed for a recession. Millenials won't see it coming, but those of us that are old enough to have lived it before can see all the signs lining up. So here's what I do know and the 5 things that I plan to do to protect myself. First of all, I'm not going on any spending sprees now that things are reopening. I won't be traveling, and I won't be overpaying for luxuries or investing in things at the expense of my future retirement. I'll be staying a little tight-fisted for the next couple of years. Number 2, I'll make sure that all my debts and credit cards are completely paid off every month so that I don't lose my own future in interest and debt. Number 3, I won't just sit on my savings without investing them either, because inflation is literally making our money worth less while it sits there in our bank account. I've already started the process of unbanking my cash and my investments because the banks make more money on my investments than I do. And I'm really done paying the fees that make them billions in profits. So number 4, we've already had several mini market crashes, and it seems that the writing is on the wall for an inevitable big correction or possibly a recession. So I'll be waiting for that before investing any more money. When it happens, I'll be investing what I have and set myself up for some bigger wins while I sit tight through the next couple of years hoping on big returns on the rebound. Have you ever noticed that the rich seem to get richer during an economic downturn? That's because economic downturns make millionaires and billionaires for those who know how to play them right. And they only come around every couple of decades. So if you haven't thought about DIY investing in the stock market up until now, now is the best time to learn what you need to learn and get yourself ready. Don't leave it up to somebody else to invest your money. And that brings me to number 5. If the last couple of years have taught us anything, it's that our vote really matters. Over 30% of Canadians didn't vote in the last election, so I'll be participating in voting in the next election. But I won't be voting for any party or leader that promises to increase deficit spending. No more wild spending promises. I'll be looking for a pledge from a leader to balance the books and start reducing our national debt. You see, just like my family, we're going to do everything we can to be financially responsible for the sake of our grandchildren, but I also expect our next government to be fiscally responsible for the sake of our next generations. So here's a reminder, I'm not selling anything and I don't want your money, but as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments about how you're preparing for the future. And if you want to come along for the ride and learn how to do-it-yourself invest, you can click the subscribe and notification bell and join our investment group on Facebook. So until next time, take care, lovies. Pay off your credit cards and stay safe.